Hey there, listeners, and welcome to the Blank Space Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Blank, coming to you from the bustling streets of Davao City in the Philippines, and this is my space. In this week's episode, we'll explore a number of topics from the latest buzzworthy news. I'll be sharing my hot takes and analysis along the way while we dive into some ironic news stories and world news, analyzing the political scene in the Philippines and U.S., pondering the psychology behind our polarized world, and philosophizing on what makes a kick-ass leader. Let's dive right in. Our first topic is some real-life ironic news headlines to help us get in the groove. For starters, the New York Times reported that the most shoplifted book in America is, wait for it, the Bible. Thou shalt not steal indeed. The gods of irony are face-palming hard on that one, but it gets better. Apparently a tree was planted in L.A. Park to honor Beatles legend George Harrison. Fittingly, the tree later died after being infested with, get this, beetles. You can't make this stuff up. And lastly, in a you had one job moment, a school sign went viral for having a glaring typo. It read, quote, "We are committed to excellence," with excellence ironically misspelled. I think someone clearly flunked their own spelling test. In less dystopian news, let's cover some global headlines. The US and China are gearing up for some high-stakes talks on artificial intelligence later this month. The goal? To try and establish some ground rules for how AI can be used, especially when it comes to things like nuclear weapons. It's a brave new world out there, folks. We've got chatbots that can write poetry, deepfakes that can make politicians say anything, and now apparently AI that could potentially start World War III. What a time to be alive. Here's an example of the latest Chinese warbots and the American model released in response to the Chinese AI war machines. These are the latest known Chinese warbots, GR1 and Yak model.
The company plans to start mass production of the robot and launch it on the market in 2024. The robot named GR1 is 1.65 meter tall, weighing 55 kilograms, being capable of walking at a speed of 5 kilometers per h and carrying weight up to 50 kilograms. Thanks to the integration of artificial intelligence, GR1 is able to perform more complex situations, but Yak was created. It is designed for using as a supply center for ammunition and supplies, as well as for reconnaissance missions. The Chinese-made Yak design is strong and smart. State-owned China Central Television introduced the robot to the public while its counterpart is less than half the size. It can carry up to 160 kilograms of goods and reach speeds of 10 kilometers per h. This model is designed for military missions capable of navigating through any terrain, including snowy deserts and rocky terrain.
And this one is an example of American warbot created in response to the Chinese AGI warbot threat. As I said, here's an example of one of the many AI models that the US is working on. As the actual finished product is classified, this is just an example. Clearly, both sides have more advanced versions that wouldn't be public knowledge. And we're certainly in a new age. If World War III does break out, it won't be just soldiers that win the war. It'll also be about who has the best AI machines. This is a crucial conversation to be having as AI technology advances at breakneck speed. We need to make sure we're using it for good and not, accidentally triggering a global apocalypse. In other news, you've probably heard about the escalating tensions between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea. China's been flexing its military muscles and claiming pretty much the entire sea as its own, based on what it calls historic rights dating back 2,000 years. Apparently, dips from the Han Dynasty still hold up in the 21st century. But the Philippines isn't backing down. They've been pushing back against China's bullying, with President Marcos Jr. taking a harder line than his predecessor. And in a move that's sure to make China clutch its pearls, the Philippines is cozying up with the U.S. and regional allies like Japan and Australia. The latest conflict happened on April 30th near the Scarborough Shoal, which China seized from the Philippines back in 2012. In a move that shocked absolutely no one, China accused the Philippines of violating its so-called sovereignty and whipped out the old water cannons to shoo away some Filipino boats. But wait, there's more. China also damaged a Philippine Coast Guard vessel and reinstalled a barrier at the shoal. Now, the Philippines isn't taking this lying down. They've been holding joint military exercises with the U.S., firing missiles at imaginary invaders and generally flexing their defensive muscles. But here's the kicker. China claims they had a secret deal with former Philippine President Duterte to avoid conflict in the area. Duterte, of course, denies any such gentleman's agreement, probably while doing his best Marlon Brando impression and muttering, "I could have been a contender.
I could have been a contender."
So why care about this aquatic pissing contest? Well, the South China Sea is a vital trade route, and any conflict there could disrupt the global economy. Plus, the U.S. has a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, meaning the U.S. and other allies could get dragged into the fray if things escalate. And let's not forget about Biden's recent gaffes and memory mishaps. The man can barely remember what year it is, let alone the names of world leaders. I mean, confusing German Chancellor Angela Merkel with former Chancellor Helmut Kohl? Come on, Joe. One's a dude, one's not. One's dead, and one's not. That's like mixing up RuPaul with Winston Churchill.
There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas.
The bar for presidential competence is so low, even a limbo dancer couldn't shimmy under it. Meanwhile, on college campuses across the U.S., students are taking to the streets to protest the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict, chanting slogans, waving signs, and occasionally getting into scuffles with the police. The protests have been particularly intense, with students expressing solidarity with Palestinians and outrage over civilian casualties in Gaza. It's a stark reminder that even in the ivory towers of academia, the real world has a way of crashing the party. Now this puts President Biden in a bit of a pickle. He's trying to toe the line between supporting Israel, a longtime U.S. ally, without alienating young progressive voters who could make or break his re-election chances. In a recent address, Biden defended the right to protest but urged demonstrators to keep things peaceful.
We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. The first is the right to free speech. and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld.
President Biden is facing some challenges of his own. A recent Washington Post poll found that black voters are feeling a bit meh about the upcoming election compared to 2020. That could spell trouble for Biden, who relied heavily on black support to win the election and clinch the presidency. But it's not just the Israel-Gaza conflict that's got young voters feeling disillusioned. The economy and issues like student debt are also top concerns. Biden's going to have to do some serious courting of the youth vote if he wants to secure a second term.
Peter, 3.4% inflation at the consumer level. What does that tell you about the state of the economy?
Well, that inflation is not going away. We're getting the nightmare landing. You know, Chairman Powell likes to look at services because that's where wages really push. And we've been hearing about how shelter's going to come down and save us. If you take energy and shelter out of services, inflation is 4%. If this is a soft landing, well, gee, I don't know how landing without wheels is a soft landing, because that's what this feels like.
Of course, it doesn't help that Trump is out there painting a picture of American carnage and promising to crack down on everything from immigration to campus protests. Many Americans resonate to his message and how these problems relate to their daily lives. All right, time to shift gears to the ironically comical, and by that I mean politics, here in the Philippines and the U.S. Let's talk about the man of the hour, the prodigal son, the one and only Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Love him or loathe him, there's no denying that Bongbong's first year as Philippine president has been a wild ride. On the plus side, Marcos Jr. has made some notable strides in foreign policy, taking a tougher stance on China and cozying up to the U.S. He's also signed some important legislation, like a new Agrarian Emancipation Act and the Regional Specialty Centers Act. Not too shabby, Bongbong. But it hasn't all been smooth sailing. Inflation hit a 14-year high early in his term, and the controversial Maharlika Investment Fund bill has raised more than a few eyebrows. And let's not forget the specter of his father's legacy, which still looms large over the Philippines like a disco-era ghost.
The transition to a low-carbon or net-zero scenario has further propelled the de-risking trend. So for the Philippines, these global developments present an opportunity to enhance our participation in regional and global value chains.
Clearly, Marcos Jr.'s first year as the Philippines president has been a mixed bag of wins and woes. Now, some folks might say that Marcos Jr. is just coasting along, running the country on cruise control. But hey, after the turbulent Duterte years, maybe a little boring competence is just what they need. Of course, not everyone is thrilled with Bongbong's performance. Critics say he's not doing enough to address human rights issues or tackle corruption. And there are whispers of military unrest and cracks in his ruling coalition. But Marcos Jr. seems unfazed. He's too busy jet-setting around the world, hobnobbing with dignitaries and posting selfies on Instagram. All right, enough about Bongbong. Let's talk about the secret sauce of effective leadership. What separates the great leaders from the mediocre ones? Is it charisma, intelligence, a killer wardrobe? Well, according to the experts, it's a little more complicated than that. Great leaders, they say, are masters of group psychology. They understand how to tap into the collective identity of their followers and inspire them to work towards a common goal, such as the speech that in big part won U.S. President Obama the election in 2008.
A president who chose the moon as our new frontier, and a king who took us to the mountaintop and pointed the way to the promised land. Yes, we can to justice and equality.
But here's the thing. What works for one group might fall flat with another. It's all about understanding the unique culture, the values of your team, and tailoring your style to fit. That said, there are a few key traits that most great leaders share. They're purpose-driven, emotionally intelligent, and masters of time management. Leaders we admire most embody qualities like integrity, empathy, courage, and the ability to unite people around a shared vision. Think John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and other political leaders. Check out this clip of leaders who delivered an absolutely perfect speech for their times, showcasing true leadership in action.
We meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. The greater our knowledge increases, the greater our ignorance unfolds.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
But perhaps the most important quality of a great leader is authenticity. Most people can smell a phony from a mile away.
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
Well, we're on the subject of good and bad leadership. Let's talk about President Biden's recent string of memory mishaps that have even his strongest supporters face-palming. A new report from Special Counsel Robert Hur dropped a bombshell describing Biden as an elderly man with a poor memory who struggles to recall basic facts when he was VP and even when his son died. Bo. Yikes. Not exactly the endorsement you want heading into a re-election campaign. Biden even mixed up world leaders and called Egypt Mexico, saying Mexico borders the Gaza Strip.
The conduct of the response in the Gaza Strip has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side.
Now, we've all had our fair share of momentary lapses in memory and the occasional brain fart, but when you're the leader of the free world, people tend to notice when you can't remember which century it is. Also, Biden's leadership skills are about as impressive as his hairstyle these days. A new poll shows Biden trailing Trump in a rematch, with voters doubting his ability to right the ship. Some Democrats are even quietly wondering if maybe it's time for Biden to pass the torch to someone who remembers what year it is.
I better not start the questions. I'll get in trouble.
What's your message for Super Tuesday voters? Everyone please move this way. Super Tuesday, do you have a message for voters? Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Biden supporters' response is, quote, "Hey, at least it's not Trump, right?" The bar for presidential competence is so low even James Cameron can't find it. Meanwhile, former President Trump spent the weekend at his Mar-a-Lago resort, taking a break from his hush money trial in New York to schmooze with donors and spew some seriously inflammatory rhetoric. In a moment that made even his strongest supporters go, yikes, when former President Trump compared the Biden administration to the Nazi Gestapo. I'm pretty sure that that's not how analogies work. Although say what you will about the man, but he knew how to get people talking. One of Trump's most popular moves was his corporate tax cut scheme, which helped boost GDP to 2.9% in 2018. Of course, the long-term benefits are wearing off, and Trump racked up some serious debt in the process.
Working to give the American people a giant tax cut for Christmas. We are giving them a big, beautiful Christmas present in the form of a tremendous tax cut. It will be the biggest cut in the history of our country. It'll also be tax reform, and it'll create jobs.
Trump also made some big promises on immigration, and his tough talk on border security still resonates with many voters.
You've said that you can take care of the border in 24 hours after taking office. How will you gather the several millions that have already entered our country illegally and return them to their country of origin?
Great question. It's not sustainable for our country. We have millions and millions of people here. It is not sustainable. Did you see in New York City where they're getting the regular students out and they're putting migrants in their place? We are going to have the largest deportation effort.
And who could forget Trump's trade wars? He slapped tariffs on everything from steel to soybeans, all in the name of putting America first. Did it work? Well, it depends on who you ask.
What we're talking about in terms of the economy is $9 billion of tariffs. That's all. That's a fraction of 1% of the whole economy.
Aluminum. If you look at a 10% tariff on aluminum, 6-pack of beer or Coke, that's $1.50. Thank you for that compliment.
In billions of dollars, correct?
On a $19 trillion economy. Look.
Perhaps Trump's most enduring legacy is his ability to connect with his base. Love him or hate him, there's no denying that Trump changed the game when it comes to political communication. Politics aside, let's zoom out and ponder the bigger question. Why are people so damn polarized these days? As a psychology nerd, I can't help but geek out the cognitive bias and social forces feeding our divisions. We've got echo chambers on social media, our brains' confirmation bias gravitating to info that fits our beliefs, and fear-mongering news stirring us up. But research shows that liberals and conservatives actually share a lot of common ground on major issues. We just get so caught up arguing over the small stuff, we miss the big picture.
Researchers found that there may be a real tipping point where no issue imaginable can unite Republicans and Democrats. Results from the study show that at any level below the critical point of polarization, the researchers could reverse the political unrest by dialing down their control parameters. However, once political polarization reaches this tipping point, the study's authors failed to ease the unrest no matter what variables they changed.
All right, let's shift gears and shine a light on some stories that the mainstream media seemingly swept under the rug. It's time for the underreported stories lightning round. First up, the Australian red meat industry claims it's reduced emissions by a whopping 78% since 2005. Sounds impressive until you realize the data they used is underreporting land clearing. Oops, guess those cows are still farting up a storm after all. Next, the FBI's crime stats for Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania are so full of holes they could be mistaken for Swiss cheese. I guess transparency is just too much paperwork for some police departments. In more uplifting news, Project Censored released its annual list of the most important but underreported stories. Spoiler alert, mainstream media still sucks at covering inequality and systemic issues. Well, that's all the news we have time for today, folks. And remember, if the news gets you down, just imagine all our world leaders as Muppets. Trust me, it helps.
Anyone home? Help! I'm trapped in a bucket!
Been there.
Help!
Thank you for watching Blank Space. If you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button for me, and if you want to stay up to date on all our latest content, feel free to subscribe and show your support for Blank Space. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned for our featured video of the week. I'm Matt Blank, and this is My Space. Signing off.
Look.